Yay, what's going on, guys? Jamming in actually on time, right? Happy New Year, you know it. Yeah, so I mean, whatever, we'll just get going. See if anybody shows up. I mean, whatever. I don't know if people are out like day drinking, getting over hangovers, but pretty mellow New Year here so far. So today, this stream we want to talk about industrial music. Now, we're talking about mainstream industrial music, like industrial pop. Um, I think I fixed the mic, but if not, let me know if it's too hot. Um, Mellow New Year talking about industrial. Well, I'm talking about mellow industrial. I'm not talking about like hardcore shit. Because I mean, off the top, right? There was a period starting in the mid '80s where dance and club music gets like money put behind it. These bands start getting signed, and Mute starts having a bunch of money, and so it becomes a totally different thing. Starting at about let's say 86, 87. I mean, Nitzareb really kind of is like one of the big breakouts in terms of, especially in Europe and England, not necessarily right out of the gate in the United States, but certainly by the time of Belief, it's going beyond, the cocoon of Wax Tracks and maybe, later Cleopatra and whatever, goth, dark, industrial, basically, theatrical, aggressive industrial sort of pop is this whole genre from the late '80s and the pre-Nirvana times, and there's a lot of value here because these records really are good. A lot of them, the easiest one out the gate is Ministry because they were on an absolutely enormous deal, and they were huge and selling tons of records, and they were just the right amount of like maybe a little shocking, to be cool for kids, especially with the videos and the LA riots for New World Order and all that. Um, you know, from the time, I mean, yeah, they had Anglophile, sort of mid-tempo electro crap in the mid '80s. Every Day is Halloween was an enormous hit, and then Jorgensen like starts really doing drugs and wants to do something super hardcore, and it's kind of in the air, it's in the ether with a lot of these people. Revco and a lot of other people are coming around. If you haven't read Al Jorgensen's book, I've recommended it in other places. It's probably the most singular document of what was really going on, and certainly his part in what was going on in that transition into like, okay, we can actually make really crazy music with this. And listen, the Jesus Lizard are part of this on their first EP. Um, the original Bloody Mary and stuff, they're using drum machines. They almost decided to be an industrial band because the limitation of the drum machines and of the sound, is like, exactly, it's its own thing. Um, and a lot of this too, you'll see like right on this page that's up here, you see EBM, electronic body music. Now, that's a really, really specific, you know, genre concept, mostly coming out of DAF in Germany. And there were English bands that were emulating it too. Famously, there's a 7-inch that a bunch of us, on the Discord have traded around. Actually, before Discord even existed, there some of the people that are still around and talking amongst ourselves. There was an English band that John Peel loved called Tools You Can Trust, and that was a band that had like a super obscure single that they were trying to like do EBM, not like Gang of Four angular post punk, but EBM has like a beat to it, and it's super inspired by like Joy Division's Heart and Soul, and the more up tempo Joy Division stuff. They took it and made it, a more, Teutonic, whatever. They made it a more, loop based, repetitive thing while still being aggressive and having that jump, hyper beat. So yeah, Blockbuster was another one, like such a great tune. But anyway, so there's a really good nut of bands that, whether it's because they've been reissued later, etc., between like classic big time industrial pop, in the mid and late '80s, and getting into even big beat, which is something I absolutely loved, and a number of us here in the chat loved. Big beat, really, one of the signature bands there is Meat Beat Manifesto, and coming out of Satyricon in the early '90s with them. But there's a lot of nuance to it because you have acts like, you know, Lords of Acid, that essentially make goth glam, and whether that can be called industrial or it's just like, oh, this is sexual electronic music, it's so like slutty and we don't care. You know, there's flavors to all of this, and goth is peppered around it, and EBM is peppered around it, and pure down the line, you know, like stomp stomp whack Nitzareb, like, you know, I mean, look at the friggin' cover of that Total Age. I mean, this is like, similarly to image-wise, not necessarily music, Depeche Mode. This is like going for the Soviet, you know, propaganda artwork and the militaristic, you know, chants and all that crap. Join in the chant. I mean, this is Nitzareb's breakthrough 12-inch, which appears on that Total Age. But that run, these 3 records are absolutely astonishingly good. That Total Age Belief is actually somewhat underrated, and Showtime is the crest. I mean, this was one of the most formative records of my childhood. I was like 14, 15 when I heard it. I'd never heard anything like it. You know, Simon is just like, he was just like such a good looking dude. He had the cool bangs and shit. You know, Lightning Man was one of the first. I think about like The Cure's Lullaby and Nitzareb's Lightning Man, these totally crazy, like, such a cool set of influences. It's got like almost like a New Orleans swing. It's got a baritone. I don't know if it's a clarinet or an oboe or whatever in it. And I mean, because these are people who spent their lives trying to make music that could swing with drum machines that couldn't do swing. There's no Fruity Loops in 1990. Like, the drum machines barely had any. Like, of course, the 808 famously has a swing fader. But, you know, to really do it and have it snap and be better than music that's sort of pinned in by the limitations of the technology was not easy to do. It was easier by 1990, but it wasn't that easy. And it's something I've repeatedly said that we sort of celebrate the Cocteau Twins for, is that Robin Guthrie was making music with really shitty, harsh drum machines and making it palatable, not making it like the drum machine didn't rule the music out, where the drum machine had ruled out, you know, a lot of independent bands who couldn't make sophisticated music with it, a la New Order, a la, you know, our favorite. You know, the mid-'80s is awash with Stock Aitken Waterman, you know, acts that are rinse and repeat, that same mid-tempo funk, you know, 16th beat swing and the Orc hits. And then you got, you know, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, you got the Oberheim, and just all this technology going in these different directions. The point is that bands that didn't have access to enormous studio resources and money and weren't producers, let's say, working with famous artists who, again, had blank checks, for them to accomplish that, I think it's really appreciable. And a lot of it was happening in industrial. So that's, yeah, I wanted to go through and see what kind of, you know, what kind of a bag you could get. I mean, you can see here, I've rebought a bunch of this. The Showtime I bought because, so Showtime was, it's infamous for having this fluorescent orange cover, but it's also infamous for that cover fading from sunlight. And so, like, you literally, it looks like it's almost black and white if you have an old copy of this. I got this because I bought a 2006 2LP reissue because it's just such an iconic piece of artwork for me and some Gen Xer my age. There was a 2LP reissue. I think it's even orange vinyl. I could give a crap. I just wanted to have a big, physical, nice quality reprint of that cover. But it is decidedly CD gang material. All of this is CD gang material. It was all digital. And you know, the idea of vinyl of it is eminently silly. You have a cigarette burn on the jewel case of your copy, John. That's sweet. That's period. That's some period correctness. We talk about that all the time. Those little flourishes, those little touchers. But yeah, I mean, this is 100% a CD medium. And so that's interesting, Jock. You're mentioning that, you know, this is similar to what I said about how in the old video I did in 2013 about goth. It was one of the 4 or 5 videos I did that really got around and got some traction. Goth is so many different things. It's Cold Wave, and then it's Cleopatra Records and Robert Smith hair and Pancake Makeup, and then it becomes mainstream with 9 Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson and all of that shit, and Rob Zombie too, who, you know, I mean, everybody loves Dragula. He's solidly locked as a positive, celebrated meme for a few of those tunes. But yeah, the industrial similarly is part of that whole thing. and what is and isn't industrial. You know, similar to Nisreb, you know, on Discogs being branded an EBM band. I would, you know, they're absolutely a cornerstone, watershed industrial band right at the top. I mean, this is like when Laibach and other bands are forming. And some others I've pulled tabs. There's a bunch of tabs I've got out. One of the things I want to get out of the way, though, if you want to collect this genre, you do have to stick to the mainstream stuff, because a lot of this experimental industrial coming out of the lineage of Throbbing Gristle, right? A lot of that is like crass, hardcore. I mean, the band Crass. It's really tied to DIY, and especially if your whole gambit is like being really extreme and terrifying and having like, you know, politically incorrect, offensive artwork, you're not going to end up on fucking Mute. So when you talk about the current 93s, Nurse with Wound, it's all self-released. It's this cottage industry of the self, and it's a total 100% intentional cult of, you know, not only personality but of the artist. I'm not really a fan of that. I never have been. Like, I can't, like, fuck the White House, all that shit. It's just never been for me. I think it's just embarrassingly trite, and convinced of its own, you know, it's just convinced of its own gravity, but I find it really laughable and pathetic, and that's me. But, you know, some of it, you know, Current 93 got bigger, and I am a fan. I mean, like, Thunder Perfect Mind is one of the ones a lot of people go to and say that, like, that's major, you know, and there was one right around that time, All the Pretty Horses is another one. Like, 90s Current 93 was doing relatively well up through Special Plan for This World in 2000. What I have collected, and sort of do still enjoy, is the season EPs. And that's just something I wanted to mention, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these artists, these kind of ultra artists. But I'm on the wrong thing. What am I on? Whose page am I on? Oh, Current 93. I thought I was on Coil. But Coil is another one similarly, where Eschaton is its own thing. But these EPs, the Equinox seasonal EPs, I just wanted to mention in 98. These are really interesting. Like, some of it is harsh and grating, but there's some really beautiful stuff too. None of it's going to be cheap. You're going to be paying $10+ for these. You know, Coil, the Horse Rotavator, famously in 86, is like, you know, every, you know, 5 records to get you into industrial is going to have Horse Rotavator, and probably, you know, a couple others. But the ones I don't see mentioned that much for Coil anyway, again, this is all self-released on Eschaton, is those season EPs. So if you were into them and maybe you hadn't focused on this run, that's one I'd recommend there. But Nurse, you know, in Current, that whole United Diaries thing, the Dortro thing, you're never going to find any of this as value. So, and it's not something I've spent time on. I don't go in for this stuff. But they're obviously significantly important, a significantly important wing of industrial that, as I say, is descended from Throbbing Gristle. But I wanted to get out of the way at the top. That's not where I'm going to go with this. And you know, the point of talking about the value of used CDs, you're not going to get it with the really, like, extreme, you know, fucking whatever, you know, edgelord bullshit like that. And I was never interested in it anyway. If you are, you're going to lose money, and it's going to cost money, and you can feel like, you know, you get it, and you can handle it, or something. I don't fucking know, whatever. Cabaret Voltaire is, you know, one of the most legendary things coming out of that period. They're right at the start of Throbbing Gristle, but they're in Sheffield. And, you know, fortunately, a lot of their stuff has been reissued, and also they have changed styles really significantly. Now, one of the signature things is when they start working with Rough Trade and they get Red Mecca. This is an absolute classic, and you can get this, you know, a reissue or whatever, for not much. And this is the other thing with industrial. Who gives a shit about a reissue? What are they going to do? They're, you know, it's not going to be pure to the original. It's fucking harsh industrial noise, and most of it's electronic. So the signal response and the whole, like, loudness wars thing is sort of irrelevant. So for me, even here in the States, I doubt we're going to find anything cheap on Red Mecca over here, but certainly in Europe and the UK, you will be able to find it for not much. Yeah, $10-12, you know, here used. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's decent. But I mean, this might still be in print. So is it even worth it at that point versus buying new? But, you know, when you get later into, like, the what they sort of called like the white funk period for cabaret in the mid 80s. There's some really great singles in there. The Drain Train, look, a lot of people hated when they tried to get, more song based and commercial, but they really didn't have any choice. And this period leading into the Conversation, this is a really, really good sweet spot. And a record that if you want to figure out if you like them, you can really, these are records you can hopefully find for not all that much. You're not going to find any vinyl because, again, that's just pure fetish property. But on CD, it doesn't look like in the US you're going to be making anywhere with this, unfortunately. $10, it doesn't even have the second disc. So yeah, unfortunately, this isn't a good example. I mean, a lot of these bands are so legendary and revered that you're not going to take advantage of it, because this wasn't a band that ever had breakthrough hits of the kind that a Ministry or a Nitzareb did. So again, this is just more about trying to talk about bands that are significant in the genre and whether or not they fall into this collectible kind of, you can get a bag, cheap CD thing. Certainly Nitzareb does. They were on Mute almost right out of the gate. They took a long time doing 12 inches to come together. Yeah, no, and exactly. The groundswell, the vast majority, rather, of the bands that followed in that Throbbing Gristle Wake, the Coils, and Nurse with Wounds and stuff. This is heavily this British English, thing. And so yeah, in the States, you're kind of caught out if they weren't, if they didn't do a deal over here the way that a lot of these other bands did. I mean, a lot of people thought Nitzareb were Belgian, similar to another band I'll get to in a bit on this. But if you go through here, right, again, this is just the quick way to do it. You click on the album. There's 173 copies of this for sale. 173. Okay, well, how many are in the States? 46 copies of this, and it's absolutely landfill. Like, you can get it for, I'm guessing there's got to be $3-4.99 copies of this. Yep, there you go. And this is, you go through, you try and find a store, somebody might have all of them. So, right here, pull up this one, $5. Okay, it's not bad. If they have other ones, and they do, now you're getting, all three of their, important landmark, really solid, committed albums before they try and kind of get hits with Kick It and Big Hit, which on Ebhead and stuff, I'll get to that. These are the three. This is the rep that Nitzareb has, is these three albums, and you get them right here for less than, basically maybe $20 shipped. If you go through the rest of this store, I'm sure this is an individual seller. You're going to be able to find other stuff that you'd want. Oh, look. Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, $69, of course. You got to be kidding me with this shit. I love it. Well, we'll go over and we'll hit up House Mountain on Twitter, and we can talk about what this is going for. Anyway, so individual sellers, that's where, like, for stuff like this where you're looking for a genre bag and maybe you want to stick to that. Smaller individual sellers, it's going to be from a personal collection. They're probably going to be in great shape. Give it a spin. I'm not seeing much here in terms of other, well, Smarties. There you go. Get some vintage cheese tech. This looks like somebody's just generally indie rock and maybe unloading a lot of crap they don't care about anymore. Fly Pan Am, not bad. Yep. There's probably some good stuff here, but not what I was expecting. Oh my God, Kissing the Pink on cassette. If you got the money, the seller's got some interesting stuff. This is really, really early Kissing the Pink. So not strictly an industrial band at all, much more a goth band that started with maybe a little bit of a cold wave pinch. Certain Things Are Likely was legit a hit. It was on Mercury. They got signed. It did okay. It's not what I go to for them. The first album, I've got like 2 copies of this. Desert Song is an all-timer. This band was just beautiful synth pop. Very much like when you think about Dead Can Dance, and if Dead Can Dance had been a pop band almost, that kind of a thing. But Kissing the Pink's a really interesting one that has only been really recycled and talked about recently. I've been championing them super loud. You know, that I'm a big fan of that act. The 5113 comp. This, man, people paid such stupid money for this, and there's one song on it, I think. Like it's the comp of the Donkey Rhubarbs and Vanillin EPs. So Pancake Lizard is like Aphex Twin's kind of down-tempo song. Absolutely love it. And I love Donkey Rhubarb as a single. Vanillin, like I don't need 8 mixes of Vanillin. But anyway, for 18 bucks, this was a Warp release in Japan only. In Australia, it was basically an APAC intro to like catching up with Aphex Twin thing of 3 singles around the time of I Care Because You Do. And, you know, Aphex Twin spawns a lot of completists. So that's not a bad price for that, frankly. I mean, it's just come down from where it was during peak Warp Aphex, you know, insanity. But yeah, you know, looking through this, I don't know, you would try to figure a bag, maybe. But, you know, if you go here, like here's someone who's got it for $4 and has a ton of stuff in the store. You know, and just see if they have anything else. Bam, they got 2 out of 3. That's not bad. Belief for 6, That Total Age for 4. You know, see what the cheap ones, the cheap sell. Oh, this is a very tiny store. Okay, Slipknot, Divine Heresy. Yeah, this is more of what we would have expected. Danzig 5, the promo of Black Acid Devil. Not bad. You know, unfortunately, it looks like they think that the promo has value, which for some people it does. A lot of Travis. I'm a Travis sucker. I love me some Pipe Dreams. Decrypts. Yep. You could probably get a little Tackhead. There's another one. Trashed copy of Reality. This is definitely legend industrial shit. So this is obviously a private seller that's got some good deeper industrial cuts in there. Mortal Rain cassette. What the fuck? Yeah, so I mean, this is just an awesome starting point to getting 3 really solid, like absolutely foundational, you know, polished industrial pop, aggressive industrial rage and pop records. I mean, this album you should never pay much for. And when I think about albums that you can absolutely get for $1 that are lights out fucking great, this is one of the like top 10s that anybody looking to get into this should have. Like, it's everywhere. It was overprinted like crazy. Geffen promoted and paid a ton of marketing for this album, and it's unbelievably good. Yeah, Jewel Case has a crack on the cover. Who cares? $1.50, and you know, do they have anything else? Probably not. No, I mean this. Yeah, this looks like a total head. Leonard Skinner head, eagle. Yeah, no. That's not gonna be a good one. But like, find a seller, you know, and like I said, this is probably gonna have sun damage. Yeah, here's somebody who has ebb head too, so maybe they have like, they're unloading all their knits or ebb. No, so this is after that. This is when they didn't sell out, but they sort of, they didn't have it together. Showtime was heavily promoted. When you have a big album with a bunch of money behind it, yeah, you end up not being able to write the next record, and that happened here. I think, in my estimation, I Give to You is leftover from Showtime. It just sounds like it should have been on it, and you know, the rest of the record is super uneven. You know, frankly, the one after it was almost better, which had the kind of attempt at a comeback single in Kick It on Big Hit. It's not a good album. But these, you know, you call it your shot, whatever. You know, these, I don't really know that Ebbhead or Big Hit are really a big deal. This was interesting. The demos for this leaked. This was a cassette that was going around. They were really trying hard to keep people aware of this band and sell them, and it just didn't really work too well. There's also, of course, the entire, you know, CD single concept, and this is really interesting because industrial music was all about remixes, you know, similar to straight techno and other genres. The singles, the CD singles for these, you know, if you can find them, definitely worth getting. Like, cool value add. You know, I'd pay $7. The singles are harder to find generally than the albums, you know. And, you know, unless it's a band that ends up doing a catch-all kind of, you know, rarities comp or whatever, you know, you go look through, you know, it looks like Mute did a 3-inch CD because that was really trendy. Did they? Yep, they did. So there's a trendy 3-inch of this. I would doubt much of these made it over to the States. Yeah, there's 2, and they're probably asking like yeah, $10. You know, this stuff is really cool. I mean, it's stuff that, you know, I'm not urgently going to be picking up, but you know, at some point, you know, when I'm a little more flush, this is the one I have, and this is the one you want. This is a sampler they did of the 3 singles from Showtime, and it's got the best mixes of them. The Industry versus the Ebb mix is the clincher. The Renegade Soundwave mix is also awesome, and then the trance mix of Getting Closer is great. This thing is a total monster, and this was relatively well circulated. So yeah, there you go. There's probably a ton of copies of this, and I would definitely recommend. Yeah, that's sweet right there. $4.99 for that, so worth it. And a small store. Yeah, there you go. They got a bunch. It looks like they've got As Is, maybe some other. Yeah, there you go. They're not going for cheap on all of it, but in terms of the value prop of getting it all in one place, this was a big Nitzereb fan that is unloading their whole collection. Holy crap. The Warsaw Ghetto So Bright So Strong maxi. Oh shit. This is a massive, oh, such an important 12-inch. This is a reissue, but yeah, holy crap. Man, you could, I mean, it's not cheap, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be. Isn't it funny how your body, great. They've really got all the good stuff, the remixes for Warsaw Ghetto, and this stuff is not that common, and clearly you can tell this is a collector, so they're being extremely straight up about condition. The condition is probably better than what they're marking. Man, they're unloading it all. Oh, the Shame single. This was not common. Man, pretty sick. Yeah, they probably have a lot of other, they potentially, well, they don't have a ton of stuff for sale, but they might have Ministry too. Nah. It's a small store. But anyway, yeah, so I mean, the sort of US foil to that definitely is Ministry. There should be no question, if you want to get into Ministry, you can do it for $5 and get like 3 albums. You really want to get this run. I mean, these 4, this is what you want. Land, Rape, and Honey, Minds of Terrible Things, especially in case you didn't feel like showing up live. This is such an incredible live album. And then Psalm 69. I mean, this run is unbeatable. It's 4, 3 albums and a live album that are all front to back, flawless. And it's everywhere, and you should be able to get the CDs for nothing. Stigmata is one of the signature tracks of MTV even launching 120 Minutes. That song was so incredibly, crossover, because it was shocking. Like, no one had heard anything like it. And Sire put the money behind it and promoted it. And, it's not even my favorite song on the record, but it's crucial. And I mean, it just rains $3 to $5 copies of this. You just try and find, a somewhat big store, go in there, search Ministry, and just try and get all 4 of these wherever you can in one bag. The Missing, The Missing does this thing that Al Jorgensen is one of the only people that really explored heavily. It's one of my favorite tricks, and he does it on all 3 of these records, if I recall. And what he does is he tempo drifts. So because the drum machine is the drum machine, and it will never alter its time signature, it's just going like whack, 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 whack on nonstop, right? He'll drift the guitar riff a beat back. So all of a sudden it's hitting on the kick instead of the snare, and he inverts the tempo. And he does it at the end of The Missing, and they even do it right at live with a real drummer. And it's why it leads off, honestly, this. And it's so fucking crazy and cool. He does. I don't think he does it toward the end of Just One Fix too. Yep. So he does it on all 3 records. And then this here, TV2, is the first time pretty much any teenager or most people would have heard what is now and popularly known as grindcore. This is, insanely fast. It's like a threshold pushing speed. Like, this song is designed to, like, I saw them play this live. It's absolutely nuts. And I mean, this was also the peak era of them in terms of the best drummer like ever. So seeing it at Lollapalooza TV2 was just absolutely crazy. Metallica do that a lot. Yes, Gabriel, that's absolutely true. Metallica is also a fan of this move, and it's something that is more common in thrash and heavy metal. Whether if somebody does it by mistake and they're like, that was cool, let's actually do it. Al did it all through this period. And yeah, I mean, look, if you're not familiar with these records, they're absolute landmarks. Like, forget industrial. This is like just incredible hard rock. It's not going to turn you off and be like, I'm, killing a cat in my shed. It's not like trying to be really scary or threatening in that way. It's like fucked up, aggressive, raging rock music in the tradition of Black Sabbath with this, one of the best producers in Al Jourgensen of electronic, club and dance music, taking it into this insane Bullet Train level. And I mean, Thieves, Burning Inside is my favorite Ministry song of all time. These records, So What, like this is a live staple, similar to like, a band like The Cure has a song like Faith and they play it for 20 minutes. They'll play So What for like 15 minutes live. It's fucking ridiculous. Dream Song is legendary, like this complete, acid fucked up thing. And it was his best band. I mean, Bill Rieflin is just, it was one of the best drummers of all time. He was just, I mean, seeing this guy live was like, oh my God, I have a whole other world of shit to learn about playing drums. Because I'd grown up playing along to The Cure and to mid-tempo Echo and the Bunnymen record. And look, Pete DeFries and this Boris Williams, those were fantastic rock drummers. This guy, holy shit, was he something else, man. And like carrying Ministry live every night on Lollapalooza. I mean, Thieves, which is not like tempo versus TV2, like, brutal tempo exercise. That guy was so missed and such an incredible player. Anyway, Ministry then goes on and just, Al Jourgensen stubbornly puts out an album every 5 minutes and goes in and out of political bullshit. And, look, the later stuff, I don't really give a shit about it. I will say this wasn't too bad. He tried to do a kind of vintage 90s live record, live Necronomicon on Cleopatra. It's not bad. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like anyone's selling it for very little. But it's pretty good, as like a late period, Reclamation live record. You saw him at SPAC, Cole, the Saratoga Performing Arts Center. I know it well. So there was a riot. I've talked about it. I did a video about Lollapalooza in 2012 when I was doing YouTube videos. And the Massachusetts National Guard was called out to the show. It's no bullshit. Like 100 riot gear cops showed up and encircled the arena. People ripped down the fence and lit 40-foot bonfires in 3 different places of the lawn at Great Woods in Massachusetts. And it was so insane and fucked up that they wouldn't let Lollapalooza back. And so the third or whatever Primus Lollapalooza went to an airport in Rhode Island. And that was the last one I went to. I only went to the first 3. But the Ministry one was the peak of Ministry. Like, at that level of stage production, Ministry should play in front of 50,000 people. Like, if you hear them do Supernaut, the Sabbath tune they did as 1,000 Homo DJs, because, like, Revolting Cocks and Pigface and all this is all related Chicago-y industrial people. And they had one of their side project-y things. There's Beers, Steers, and Queers. There's, Jesus Built My Hot Rod. And like I said, 1,000 Homo DJs. And Supernaut, this cover of Black Sabbath, was just, when I heard that, I was like, I had to go find that CD immediately because some gothier kid I knew had it. And I was just like, fuck. And that Al Jourgensen's voice, it's artificial and everything, but like, you got like, there's a famous anecdote. Fred Durst from fucking Limp Bizkit wanted him to produce a Limp Bizkit record because he wanted his vocal sound, because Fred Durst can't sing for shit. He can't sing. He's not even good talking. Like, his voice is so awful and uninteresting. He sounds like a fucking guy at a pickup basketball game. And he asked Al Jourgensen to Jourgensen tells this story in his book. He asked Al Jourgensen to put like the same vocal effects and patches on his voice so he could sound like Al Jourgensen and be like intimidating and hard. And it's like, no, dude, it's his voice is the reason. It's not the square wave fuzz distortion on the signal. So it's a really funny story. And you may be able to Google it without having to buy his book, but you should buy his book. Because I mean, this guy, I believe 50% of the insanity in his life is documented in his memoir. there's probably 50% more illegal and fucking stupid, outrageously awful, self-absorbed, narcissistic, nihilistic bullshit this guy did when he was up his ass so far that he rolled 3 Supras and, you know, was like basically trying to start a fucking cult in Texas on a ranch. Like, this guy was so fucking far gone. He was drinking like a bottle of Johnny Blue with acid in the bottle of the bottom for like days on end. I mean, he's been to rehab I don't know how many times. It's crazy. It's just nuts. And I mean, look, I don't celebrate it, but I'm a fan of, like, you know, rock and roll death cult bullshit to an extent. I'm not gonna lie about it. And it was definitely part, you know, similar to the Cure's Maudlinism or Joy Division's bullshit, you know, reputation, that you understand better as you get older, and you develop a more kind of 360-degree nuanced view of, like, that's not a great way to live. You know what I mean? But like when you're a kid, it seems so. There's a line in that fucking hilarious piece of shit Bradley Cooper movie where he's like basically trying to be Anthony Bourdain. And there's this other British actor who's like, he says something to the effect of like, you know, youthful nihilism is appealing. When you're, you know, 38, it's really not. And it's true. And but everyone who's been infected by that impulse struggles with it, and some people never get over it and they die. Throb died for Primal Scream. You know, like, some people just never get out of it, whether it's a bottle or it's a powder or it's a pill. Yeah, Limp Bizkit did famously cover Thieves, which is hilariously double stupid because Primus covered it and did an actually fucking amazing cover that is legendary because Les Claypool plays the 16th beat bass drum on his bass, and I saw him do it, and I actually got knocked unconscious because I didn't understand. To me, Primus was like a dork band. I didn't like, they were like a muso dork band. Like, they weren't cool at all. I didn't understand that, like, the Beavis and Butthead generation was like wanting to fucking mosh to Primus. When I went to, without any thought, I ran right up into the middle of the front of the floor, well, it was grass, to get close to the stage to check out Primus because I had loved them for years. You know, as a drummer, they were, obviously Herb was really inspiring to me and taught me a lot. I learned triplets from Primus, kick triplets, and I do them wrong. I do heel toe for doubles and heel toe heel for triplets. You're supposed to do pad push. Anyway, yeah, I got knocked out. They opened with Thieves, and I was like, holy shit, this is so cool. And I was just like moshing with, you know, some other guys, and actually there were some gals too. And then all of a sudden when it comes in, someone like, I don't think they did a stage dive or somebody threw them wherever, but they went ass over tea kettle, and their Doc Martin hit me right in the back of the crown of the head. I actually got knocked out, and someone dragged me out of the pit. And I woke up, I had a concussion. I woke up, I threw up, and the older kid who had driven us there took me to the hospital in Providence. Man, yeah, I told that story more briefly in that old video 10 years ago. But so, you know, Ministry and Its Reb, that's just a total win. Another interesting one is Alan Wilder. Now, this is not strictly industrial. This is sort of getting into electronic music, but in 89 into 91, he had this project going called Recoil. This is like him, okay, I'm not going to quit Depeche Mode. This guy, so if you don't know, Alan Wilder is like, some people would argue he's responsible for all of Depeche Mode's best material. That's your argument to have. But, you know, Martin Atkins was involved in this, and he samples Buka White. So this is sort of famous for electro blues for Buka White sampling an old, scratchy record, like a Delta Blues record, the exact way that Moby did. And Moby is sort of ancillary to this record. So it's very clear that Moby stole this idea and did better with it. Like, honestly, this is an 8-minute dirge. I can't make it all the way through it. But Tony Halliday from Curve co-wrote and sings 2 songs on this. I think it's Bloodline and Freeze. And it leads off with a cover of the Alex Harvey band's Faith Healer, which is not a very good cover. It's one of my favorite songs, the original Alex Harvey version, and was an absolutely enormous influence on Robert Smith and The Cure. But the singer from Nitzer Ebb sings it. And so it's a collab with all these other people in the early 90s, late 80s that are in this, pre-grunge, refined electronic industrial pop situation. But yeah, the Faith Healer cover is not great. I give him credit for trying. The important things on this record are the Tony Halliday cuts and electro blues. And this, again, $1 easy. The Recoil project, it started in that pretentious kind of like Wire way. I'm doing 2 20-minute movements. Dude. But I mean, again, they got repackaged immediately by Mute because Depeche Mode got so big that they were putting out, Martin L. Gore's solo albums and anything Depeche Mode because they were just selling fucking truckloads of records around the time of Music for the Masses and especially 101. But Bloodline is like, this forestalled him quitting Depeche Mode by 4 years by them letting him spend time on this and actually release singles and have his own promo cycle. Steve Lyon did it, legendary. This guy is, he's got credits on everything. He's like Flood almost. But, for a flyer, for $1, if you see it, Bloodline, I would say check out. Bigger name classically industrial bands. Yeah, Skinny Puppy, you can get this stuff all day. Network is an enormous label. These have been in print, repressed, reissued forever. And Too Dark Park is obviously the one. This came out when I was a teenager. This is how everybody heard about Skinny Puppy. But again, look, they're starting at $6. Industrial music, Network isn't Geffen. Like in the Nitzer Ebb situation, you have Geffen pressing 250,000 copies of an album that is never going to sell 20. Skinny Puppy's records, they're going to be, not necessarily, the Network ones are your best bet for sure in terms of value. The problem is Skinny Puppy is super uneven and weird in terms of which records people favor, which ones are like the one. I mean, Rabies, Last Rites, they all have their fans. Again, you're not going below $5. I mean, look, it's a band with an enormous cult following. It's a band that, industrial music generally does have, similar to goth, a tax on it. Bites in Remission. Yeah, I mean, because it's, it's sort of, the beginning. A lot of people, like Cab Voltaire, same argument. The first record's the only way, and after that, they became too commercial. Yeah, I mean, I know you're not saying that for your fellas, but like, Bites, has been, these have all been reissued forever. But again, look, right, like on Discogs anyway. But look, if you see this, like, go see if it's in print. Like, it might be. Like, I've made this mistake. I actually did this to somebody on the Discord. I felt so bad. I was like, holy crap, this box set, it's totally out of print. And then someone else in the Discord was like, actually, that's still in print. You get it for $15. And I was like, oh, fuck. So I actually PayPal'd them money. I felt so bad. They spent like $45 on this box set that I thought was out of print. Totally wasn't. You could get it for nothing, shrink wrapped. So I actually sent them money to offset having spent money on my recommendation. So, get in the cord, and if I lead you wrong, I'll make it good. So again, yeah, look, $12.50, like Skinny Puppy tax, man, like cool, all dark music tax. It's a thing. It's kind of sucks. But again, I'm not the authority in any sense on Skinny Puppy. This is not my shit, principally. This was too, well, there you go. You can certainly get Rabies for nothing. And it may be a vein, like, because there was, okay, so Capitol did this. There you go. So this is pressed in excess because it's on Capitol. Licensed surely through Network. So you got to look for stuff that's in that position, but is also good because, again, Skinny Puppy becomes different things and goes down a lot of rabbit holes. I will pay that tax for Rabies. Yeah, and then so yeah, I didn't pull this up because, again, similarly, a band that goes all over the place is Killing Joke, because Killing Joke starts as an angular post-punk band in this phenomenal run in the early 80s. And I mean, up through Fire Dances and Nighttime is where they become like, we need to start selling some fucking records, guys. So I mean, this is like when the Cult comes out, transitions out of Southern Death Cult. The mid 80s, Killing Joke becomes essentially like a goth flavored, mid-tempo band. And famously, 80s was a big influence. Everybody says Cobain ripped it off. And that's fine, and Kings and Queens though is the one for me. I mean, this Kings and Queens still has the lineage of What's This For, which to me is their best album. You know, Attention, Follow the Leaders. This record is unbelievable. You know, I love it. Some of the songs are a bit drudgy and long, but Exit 2, like, this thing absolutely crushes. And I mean, the debut does as well. Revelations is a contended album. I think it's very stereotypically their difficult third album. There's not much I go to on this. I was never a big fan. But then they are like, because of that, you know, they get a deal with EG and they reconstitute themselves and they do Fire Dances. Now, Fire Dances is like the most classical gray Anglican, you know, like cult rushing, like flange guitar shit. There's 4 or 5, well, 3 really strong songs. It's a fun listen. It's a good listen. But, you know, the image is a lot more goth than the music, I would say. Certainly Chaz is like, you know, the ultimate goth frontman. I mean, dude came out of the gate with black eyeliner and Pancake and, like, you know, loved having the eyeliner melt down his face and all that shit. They're just a majorly legendary band. Now, when you talk about them with respect to industrial, yeah. So they started to make this pivot, and unfortunately, like, record labels kind of failed, you know, wrote them off, and could have capitalized, because this album did pretty well. It's a good album. I love the song Jaina. I've always loved it. There's 2 other really good cuts on this. The lead one it's really long, but it's good. Communion is good, if I remember correctly. The doc about them is almost unwatchable. I mean, if they're involved in it, it's going to be, forget it. I mean, I could not imagine trying to do a documentary where you're doing justice to youth and jazz. Like, they will just take over everything. It would be like trying to do a documentary about The Cure. You know what I mean? Like, they are so in control of their own mythos, and they're frankly really sort of paranoid and weird about it. And fine, they can do whatever they want. I mean, they've diluted their brand pretty roughly during the Cleopatra style 90s era. But this thing is a real standout. It's a very good, incredibly heavy, like, this is a cinder block production wise. The bass on this thing is so good, the low end. And it's got really good sludgy, you know, wall of sound guitars. I can't recommend it enough. And I mean, you can get this for nothing. And I mean, even if it was just for Jaina and Pandemonium, give me a break. You know, what a take for $1 to have it on physical, digital, lossless. You know, I'd look for that, check for that every time out. The early stuff, you know, the early stuff you can probably get cheap because of reissues, but their reissues are really dodgy. So, you know, CD ultimately, like I said, and I've said repeatedly, early mid-'80s classic alt-rock bands like this that were done all analog, the initial CDs are either really soft and are going to give you a lot of hiss and problems with the headroom, or the remasters are going to be so friggin' blown out that they're going to sound really chubby and kind of ugly. So it doesn't look like in the States anyway you're making out on this, and these are reissued. The Virgin reissues going for that much. This is no jewel case CD. I love this. So if like I said, if you get yourself some Slug blank CD cases, oh yeah, the first Killing Joke, just for the image, the iconic album cover, I have that on vinyl for that reason. Totally agree, Free Real Feels. That's one where there are certain things where I want the full-size 12-inch. Like, I just wanted to look at it. I don't care about vinyl, but as an object, there are certain records I iconically want to have on vinyl, and the first Killing Joke is totally one of them. This one is not, because the album cover is so ugly and who gives a shit. But the first album cover of Killing Joke is just, I mean, it's like any signature piece of rock and roll. It's like the Sex Pistols, never mind the Bollocks in a lower tier. Most people prefer the debut. No, definitely, Jock, that's not uncommon. For me, it's that when they get into the dun, 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 like all that shit, I'm fucking such a sucker for that shit. Like the hip shake drum tom thing on this record, and they beat it into the fucking ground. But this is the original EG CD you're getting. It just doesn't have the plastic jewel case for $9. I would say go for that shit, because the Virgin reissues are really hot. They're not awful, but they're pretty hot, and you're not getting them for a bargain in the States, clearly. Not a shock there either. Killing Joke never did shit in the States. Honestly, the first album on import, on the back of punk being a thing, is probably the only one that was well known. certainly. What's This For had no distribution over here, because I had this is a band Peter Prescott from Mission to Burma turned me on to. I'd never heard of them in the late 80s when I was starting to learn about cool music, and like I was coming into the store and like, I love Camper Van Beethoven, tell me what good music is. And like, you know, he's just like, fucking, okay, this kid. But he was like, you should check out Killing Joke's first album. And I was just like it was fucking life-changing. But he told me, he's like, you can't get any of the other records. They never got distributed over here. And then this EG label was a total void in terms of American distribution as well, despite the fact that whatchamacallit, they legit were getting played on college radio in 85, because this is when goth and The Cure and everything starts to blow up. Killing Joke benefited from that. 80s was a good radio hit on college radio, and so was Kings and Queens. That's where I first heard Kings and Queens on the radio, on a college radio show, and, you know, tried to find that album. But yeah, you know, this came out when I was a sophomore or something in college, and yeah, this was like, I mean, all the mall goth people that were into Wax Trax and that had the black box and all that shit. Yeah, this record was this was a drink coaster for goth kids in the mid 90s, like kids that were real goths that weren't into Marilyn Manson, that were like, you know, listened to Bauhaus and were like studied into goth in the 80s. We're hanging on to that into the 90s. Killing Joke's Pandemonium was definitely, yes, and it has holy geometry, right? Yeah, the Jazz's mysticism is legendary, and a big part of Killing Joke, and always has been. I mean, it's like, you know, it really got stupid starting here. This bizarre one-off Geordie thing with Geordie. Jazz, I don't know, man. What a fucking character. I mean, just, you gotta tip your cap. And he's so bitter too. I love how bitter he is about everything that's ever happened to Killing Joke, because why not? Yeah, this DVD, I mean, there you go. This DVD performance of, I think it's of a reunion show in 2003. Yeah. You know, and of course it ends with Pandemonium. I mean, that became a signature song of theirs off of that album. So, funnily, Jaina's not on there. I don't know why, because Jaina's like a My Bloody Valentine song with a goth crooner over it. It's really good. Yeah, Sam G, this is a really good call out. People who are throwing away old computer games, those are CD cases. Like, just get that shit. If you're going to start collecting CDs, you're going to get broken cases. You're going to get like people advertising discounts that are just the artwork in a plastic slip. And they're doing that so they have enough room to store all this stuff. And because they can't have the factorial, you know, square footage of plastic CDs really does add up. Fucking trust me, you should see my basement I'm in. So, you know, stores that are trying to save space will often just chuck the jewel case and put everything in little plastic slips. If you have the case, who gives a shit, and they're selling it to you for a discount? It's something to look out for. You find stores that run that way, you can really get some outsized deals, because they're trying to do right by the consumer or whatever, and entice the consumer by acknowledging like you're not getting the full product. It's a good take. Man, I spent a lot of time on Nitzreb. My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, you know, want to give some shout outs to some Boston brethren. So Buzz McCoy moved out to Chicago and hooked up a Groovy Man, and this record is absolutely signature. Like, this is OG Wax Trax, like as much as anything with Al, and you know, he's obviously around it anyway. The Bomb Gang Girls, like, everything about this is really good shit. You're not gonna, I mean, you probably can find a CD reissue of this for not that bad. This is not a band you're gonna find cheap because of the cult tax. Like, you know, this record, I've seen this album for sale for over $100, the original vinyl. And I'm sure there are people on Discogs, 50 pounds. Yeah, here's like a price tag scrape, $50 on LP. It's iconic, and for a lot of people, this is one where you actually would want the vinyl to have that. It was a very, very crucial, like, massive goth industrial crossover record into techno, really. I mean, this is very loopy. You know, it's very loopy, and it has real flavors of having heard late 80s kind of very dawn of post-acid techno, and it's got lots of sampling. You know, that's one of the key things. Like, I'm a big sucker for the sampling bands. But the sampling bands have their own problem, which is nobody gave a shit about the legal aspect of the sampling back then, and that's all different now. So some of these reissues, I don't think Kill Cult got tagged on this and had to re-edit, but there have been cases of bands that had to literally re-edit tapes, re-edit mixes and masters to pull out things they couldn't clear, which really sucks from a historical accuracy perspective. But Confessions of a Knife is a pretty monster record. This is, for me, you know, I mean, basically this is the run, right? They got Confessions, Sexplosion, and 13 Above. These are like the 3 core records. Basically everybody's like, they got a major label deal, they left Wax Trax and tried to make it, you know, screw them. You know, 13's still okay. But, you know, after that, they become so self-parodic. And it's just like, oh, boobs. Like, I don't know. Like, everything about them just kind of, for me, sucks after the initial run. They kind of, you know, it's sort of similar to Lords of Acid in that way. You know, they're also incredibly famous for this. Voodoo You is one of the most iconic, you know, out there, you know, crazy, sexual, you know, electronic, dark music. Oh, my God. But, you know, Lust was a massive hit out of the gate. I Said on Acid is like a fucking legendary crossover, like dirge, acid, industrial fucking masterpiece. The opening is a little bit hot, but, you know, these guys were really, really good for a lot longer than they get credit for. Certainly way better for longer than Thrill Kill Cult, in my view. You know, did they become a stupid sort of crazy Disneyland circus live? Yeah, of course they did. Was I like interested in that? Not particularly. I mean, listen, I'm not like a dress up, hair dye, let's all go, you know, crazy. You know, it's just a vibe, whatever, it's fine. But it's a gothy, you know, vibe that I just don't go for. But you know, despite that being present in the same way that it later becomes sort of with Thrill Kill Cult, it's so out of the gate and in your face and part of what Lords of Acid were, yet the music is pretty solid. You know, there are even people who like that comeback Deep Chills record and thought it wasn't too bad. You know, but yeah, I mean, look, this is what you're dealing with here. This is kind of like their whole thing. It's like all, you know, bondage and like we're out with kink and sex and all that shit. Yay, wow, that's shocking. But whatever. Certainly through 90, you know, 94 and the singles, you know, also the B-sides are kind of cool experiments. These guys were really like their own thing and they were doing it in a way that was pretty strong. But, you know, when I talk about this and I talk about the edge of Big Beat and stuff, you know, Meat Beat Manifesto is the band and Satyricon is the album. I mean, 99%. The early stuff is more industrial, and then they really become the progenitors and pioneers of what we think of in terms of classic Big Beat, like sampled, crushed, you know, compressed, bit crushed drum loops, and, you know, that kind of like hooligan, you know, lazy walk, talk over the track shit. Satyricon is an all-time fucking classic. Edge of No Control, Original Control, like everything, Circles, like this whole fucking thing shreds. And you can get it for nothing. And like this is like dollar for dollar. Meat Beat up through here, and there's a reissue of Armed Audio Warfare I mentioned when I came across it in another stream. You can find that anywhere if you go down. It's got a gun on the cover, this thing. So the Mute reissue in 94, this album never got released and it was cobbled together from other shit. It's all from 88, you know, and it's around that period of like, you know, these other two bands I'm not gonna have time to get to, Frontline Assembly and Front 242, you know, like early and mid 80s Canadian and Belgian acts that were so incredibly important. Meat Beat kind of builds off that, and they were, you know, they had reach into, you know, Orbital and other acts at that time that were coming up in the very early 90s. But like all of these have been reissued and are really easy to find. And, you know, there are people who go in for actual sounds and voice, like the late period I wasn't big on. Subliminal, yeah, see, a lot of people do like actual sounds and voices, I get it. And there are people who also love Are You Okay? I mean, look, there's people who basically think In Dub is the best album they ever did. You know, fine. You go with what you go for. For me, it's the fact that like Satyricon was like, it's similar to Killing Joke's Pandemonium. Everybody in college had this record and was blasting it. You know, Consolidated, the Yeasty Girls, You Suck, all these big beat, like early big beat things. and it was just like, it was this sound and you couldn't get enough of it. You literally couldn't get enough of it because there were no bands doing it. There were only like 4 or 5 records that sounded like it, that were using that big drum, backbeat style of sampling versus drum machine. It was a new idea in this, sort of electronic and dance pop genre. And, it's exemplified. I mean, look, Milli Vanilli essentially are doing beat sampling. They're doing Funky Drummer. Electronic, when Bernard Sumner breaks up New Order with Johnny Marr, they did it. Depeche eventually sort of does it. But Meat Beat just is the band. I mean, when you think about the success of the Chemical Brothers and the bands, and shit like Death in Vegas that comes in, Crystal fucking Method, that comes on the back of what these guys fucking did, you gotta owe it. The fact that you can get the peak initial run of their great shit, and even if you don't like all of it, live through their evolution up into the absolute crescendo of Satyricon for like $8. Get on that. I mean, absolutely, just such a crucial fucking band. And again, for me, like this is the kind of music I like. I already talked at the beginning, like industrial, goth, experimental. There's all different ways to rotate and approach these genres. Everyone has their own sort of thing they like. Me, as a drummer, I'm a big beat guy, and so that's why Nitzer Ebb is one of my favorites, and Ministry is one of my favorites. That's sort of the thread for me, is the beat. And it's even why I like Lords of Acid's early stuff, because the beats are like mega fucking slamming kick drums, like really chubby, heavy shit. Yeah, an FSOL sample for Papua New Guinea for radio. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, these guys were doing shit that others weren't. Right out of the gate, though, like God O.D. was a substantial, Disgust hit, and they had a lot. They had a lot going on, a lot on the ball, and wanted to call them out for sure. So these 4 all the way up, just really solid shit. This for me is where I lose it. Like, album's way too long, way too many ideas, kind of trying too hard. It's just too much. Like, I think they drowned in their own kind of shit at that time. And yeah, like I say, a lot of people feel like they really got it back on Actual Sounds and Voices and even kept it through Are You OK? It's a band you can find their stuff anywhere. I mean, basically any of these records for $2 or anything under $5, you're not going to go wrong by exploring it, learning about it, and figuring out whether it's for you. And that's sort of the, obviously you can go on streaming and check them out, before you make that call. But if you're running down a store or somebody who has a bunch of it all at once, just get it. All right, so that's going to do it for today. But yeah, it was fun. I kind of drowned on a couple art. I didn't expect that to happen. But thanks for coming through, hanging out, and we'll do it again Thursdays 7 p.m. Eastern, as you see. Sundays 2 p.m. Eastern. I finally did a Sunday stream, even though it's New Year's Day. I'm not doing anything, so no problem. I appreciate people who showed up too. I might have had stuff going on. Solid showing. So thanks again. See you Thursday night. And yeah, we'll figure out what we're going to chat about in the week. All right, bye.